Maria Santos had been cleaning the Rossetti mansion for 3 years, and in all that time, she had perfected the art of being invisible. Every morning at 6 sharp, she would slip through the servants' entrance, her worn canvas shoes making no sound against the marble floors that cost more than most people's yearly salary. The family treated her like a piece of furniture, useful when needed, forgotten when not. At 28, Maria had learned that being poor and foreign made you disappear in the eyes of the wealthy. Her broken English and quiet demeanor meant the Rossettis never bothered to learn her full name, calling her simply the cleaning girl when they acknowledged her existence at all. This invisibility, which had once made her feel worthless, was about to become her greatest advantage. The Rossetti estate sprawled across 15 acres in the hills overlooking the city. Vincent Rossetti, the man everyone called Don Vince, had built his fortune through what the newspapers politely called business ventures. Maria knew better. She had eyes and ears, and 3 years of cleaning blood from expensive carpets had taught her things she wished she could forget. On this particular Tuesday morning, Maria arrived to find the house buzzing with unusual activity. Black cars lined the circular driveway, and men in expensive suits stood around smoking cigarettes, their jackets bulging in ways that suggested they carried more than wallets. Something big was happening, but Maria had learned long ago not to ask questions. She simply tied her headscarf tighter and began her daily routine. The mansion had 42 rooms, and Maria knew every inch of it. She started with the kitchen, where the staff barely glanced at her as she emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces. The cook, Mrs. Patterson, was gossiping with the other housekeepers about the morning's excitement. 20 men came through here at dawn, Mrs. Patterson whispered, her voice carrying despite her attempt at discretion. All of them armed, all of them angry. Something's got the Don rattled. Maria kept her head down, focusing on scrubbing the already spotless countertops. She had learned that people said the most interesting things when they forgot she was there. I heard it's about that prosecutor, another voice chimed in. The one who's been asking questions about the family's businesses. Word is he's getting too close to something important. The prosecutor. Maria had seen his picture in the newspapers her neighbor sometimes shared with her. A young man with kind eyes who had been making headlines for his campaign against organized crime. She had wondered what kind of person had the courage to stand up to men like Vincent Rossetti. As the morning progressed, Maria moved through her routine with mechanical precision. She dusted the elaborate furniture in the sitting rooms, polished the silver in the dining room, and cleaned the bathrooms that were larger than the apartment she shared with 3 other women. The work was hard, but she needed every dollar to send home to her sick mother in El Salvador. Around noon, Maria was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard raised voices coming from behind the heavy oak doors of Vincent Rossetti's private study. She had been in that room countless times to clean, but never when the Don was conducting business. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that she doubted anyone had ever read, and a massive desk dominated the center of the room. Behind that desk hung a painting of Vincent's father, the previous head of the Rossetti family. Today, however, the study was occupied by angry men discussing things that made Maria's blood run cold. She couldn't help but slow her movements as she dusted the hallway table, straining to hear the conversation that could get her killed if anyone discovered she was listening. The prosecutor has files, a gravelly voice was saying. Documents that could put us all away for life. My sources at the courthouse say he's planning to file charges within the week. Maria recognized the voice as belonging to Tommy, the Hammer Carbone, Vincent's right-hand man. She had cleaned blood from his knuckles more than once, though she had always pretended not to notice. Then we handle it the way we always handle problems. Vincent's voice was calm, almost conversational. Permanently. It's not that simple, boss, another voice interjected. This guy's got protection. Federal marshals watching him around the clock. And if something happens to him now, With all the attention he's been getting, it'll bring down heat we can't afford." Maria's hands trembled as she continued her dusting, moving as quietly as possible. She knew she should leave, should pretend she had never heard any of this. But something kept her frozen in place. "Then we get creative," Vincent said, and Maria could hear the smile in his voice. "What's the one thing every man has that can be used against him?" There was a pause, then Tommy's voice again. "His family." "Exactly. Prosecutor Daniel Morrison has a beautiful wife and a 6-year-old daughter, Sarah and little Emma, if I remember correctly. They live in a nice house on Maple Street, number 47. The girl goes to St. Mary's Elementary, gets picked up every day at 3:15 by her mother." Maria felt sick. She had heard enough stories, cleaned up enough messes, to know what Vincent Rossetti was capable of when he wanted to send a message. The idea of a child being hurt because her father was trying to do the right thing made her stomach churn. "You want us to grab them?" Tommy asked. "Not yet. First we send a message. Something subtle but clear. Let the good prosecutor know that we know where his family sleeps. If he's smart, he'll back off. If not—" Vincent's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. "When do we move?" "Tonight. I want you to pay a visit to 47 Maple Street. Nothing dramatic, just make it clear that the family is being watched. Cut the phone lines, maybe leave something behind to show we were there. A photo of the girl at school, perhaps. Something that lets Morrison know we can reach his family anytime we want." Maria's legs felt weak. She had to do something. But what? If she went to the police, who would believe a maid with poor English and no proof? And even if they did believe her, Vincent Rossetti had people everywhere. He would know the leak came from inside his house, and Maria would disappear just like others who had crossed the family. But she couldn't let an innocent family suffer for one man's courage. There had to be a way to warn them without exposing herself. As the voices in the study grew quieter, Maria forced herself to continue cleaning, her mind racing. She finished the hallway and moved on to the guest bedrooms, all the while thinking about the prosecutor's family. A wife and a 6-year-old daughter who had no idea their lives were about to be turned upside down. By late afternoon, Maria had made her decision. It was risky, potentially suicidal, but she couldn't live with herself if she did nothing. She would find a way to warn the Morrison family, even if it meant putting her own life in danger. As she prepared to leave the mansion for the day, Maria noticed something unusual. Vincent Rossetti was in his study again, but this time he was alone, and the door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see him opening a wall safe hidden behind the painting of his father. Her breath caught as she watched him remove several thick manila envelopes and what looked like a small ledger book. Vincent placed the items on his desk and began photographing the pages with a digital camera. Even from her limited view, Maria could see that the documents were covered in handwriting and numbers. Whatever was in that safe, it was important enough for Vincent to be documenting it personally. After several minutes, Vincent returned the originals to the safe and locked it. He then took the camera and the manila envelopes and left the study, heading toward the back of the house. Maria waited until she heard his footsteps fade away, then quickly finished her cleaning and headed for the servants' exit. As she walked to the bus stop, Maria's mind was churning with plans and possibilities. She had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple threat against a prosecutor's family. Vincent Rossetti was documenting his most sensitive materials, which could only mean one thing. He was either planning to flee or preparing for a war that would require him to have leverage over his enemies. Either way, innocent people were going to get hurt unless someone did something to stop it. And the only someone in a position to help was a maid that everyone ignored, a woman who had just discovered that being invisible might be the most powerful weapon of all. The bus ride home gave Maria time to think. She lived in a small apartment in the city's Latin Quarter, a neighborhood where people minded their own business and asked no questions about where their neighbors worked or what they might have seen. It was the perfect place for someone who needed to disappear. That evening, as Maria sat in her tiny kitchen eating a simple dinner of rice and beans, she made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out a piece of paper and began to write, her careful handwriting forming words that could save innocent lives or cost her own. She was going to warn the prosecutor's family, but she was also going to do something much more dangerous. She was going to find a way to get into that safe and discover what Vincent Rossetti was so desperate to protect. Because Maria Santos, the invisible maid that everyone ignored, had finally realized that sometimes the most powerless person in the room was actually the one with all the power. The game was about to begin, and for the first time in her life, Maria was ready to play. The next morning, Maria arrived at the Rossetti mansion with her heart pounding and a plan that could either save innocent lives or end her own. She had spent the entire night thinking through every detail, every possible way things could go wrong. The anonymous warning note she had slipped under Prosecutor Morrison's door at midnight was just the beginning. Vincent Rossetti was in an unusually good mood when Maria saw him that morning. He was standing in the main hallway, adjusting his tie in the ornate mirror, humming a tune she didn't recognize. The sight made her skin crawl because she knew exactly why he was so pleased with himself. His plan to terrorize an innocent family was moving forward. "Morning, sir," Maria said quietly as she passed by with her cleaning supplies, keeping her eyes downcast as always. Vincent barely glanced at her, which was exactly what she had hoped for. After 3 years of being invisible, she was counting on that invisibility to protect her now. The mansion was quieter than usual. Most of Vincent's men had left early, presumably to carry out various tasks related to the previous day's meeting. This worked perfectly for Maria's plan. With fewer people around, she would have better access to the places she needed to be. As she cleaned the first-floor rooms, Maria kept her ears open for any information about the Morrison family. Around 10 o'clock, her patience paid off when Tommy Carbone arrived with news that made her blood boil. "The prosecutor got the message," Tommy reported to Vincent as they stood in the foyer. Maria was dusting nearby bookcases, moving slowly and quietly to avoid drawing attention. "Good. Did he seem appropriately concerned?" "More than concerned. My guys saw him loading his family into a car this morning with suitcases. Looks like they're going into hiding." Maria felt a surge of relief. Her warning had worked. The Morrison family was safe, at least for now. But her relief was short-lived as Vincent's response made it clear that the danger was far from over. "Hiding won't help them for long," Vincent said with cold satisfaction. "I've got people everywhere. They can't stay hidden forever, and when they surface, we'll be ready. In the meantime, this buys us time to handle the more pressing matter." "The federal investigation?" "Among other things, I need you to arrange a meeting with our friends in Chicago. Tell them it's time to activate the insurance policy we've been keeping." Tommy nodded and left to make the arrangements. Maria continued cleaning, but her mind was racing. What insurance policy? And what did Chicago have to do with anything? She was beginning to realize that the threat to Prosecutor Morrison was just one small piece of a much larger and more dangerous puzzle. Later that morning, Maria was cleaning Vincent's study when she noticed something that made her heart race. The painting of Vincent's father was slightly crooked, suggesting that the safe behind it had been accessed recently. More importantly, Vincent had left some papers on his desk, papers that he would normally have locked away immediately. Glancing toward the door to make sure she was alone, Maria moved closer to the desk. The papers appeared to be copies of the documents she had seen Vincent photographing the day before. Her English wasn't perfect, but she could make out enough to understand that these were financial records of some kind. Numbers, dates, and names were scattered across multiple pages. One name kept appearing, Senator Robert Whitmore. Maria recognized it from the newspapers. He was a powerful politician who had been making speeches about law and order, promising to crack down on organized crime. Seeing his name connected to Vincent Rossetti's private documents was shocking. But what truly made Maria's hands shake was a handwritten note clipped to one of the pages. Chicago payment confirmed. Senator's vote secured for Highway 9 development project. Federal oversight eliminated as promised. Maria couldn't believe what she was reading. A United States senator was taking money from the Rossetti crime family. And not just taking money, but actively working to help them avoid federal investigation. The corruption went much higher than anyone imagined. She quickly memorized as much as she could before hearing footsteps in the hallway. Maria hastily returned to her cleaning, her mind reeling from what she had discovered. This wasn't just about protecting one prosecutor's family anymore. This was about exposing a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government. As the day progressed, Maria found herself paying closer attention to every conversation she overheard, every document she glimpsed while cleaning. The more she learned, the more horrified she became. The Rossetti family wasn't just involved in traditional organized crime. They were systematically corrupting public officials, buying votes, and manipulating government policies for their own benefit. Around 3 o'clock, Maria was cleaning the second-floor bathroom when she overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. Vincent was in his bedroom next door, speaking in low tones that he probably thought couldn't be heard through the walls. But the mansion's old plumbing carried sound in unexpected ways, and Maria could hear every word. "The Chicago meeting is set for tomorrow night," Vincent was saying. "Tell Marconi I'll have the final payment ready. Once the senator votes against the Organized Crime Task Force funding, we'll be in the clear." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Then Vincent continued. "What about the prosecutor? Any word on where they're hiding his family?" Maria held her breath. "Good. Keep tracking them. I want them found within 48 hours. The longer Morrison thinks he can defy us, the more dangerous this becomes." Another pause. "No, don't touch them yet. I have a better idea. Morrison's not the only prosecutor working on this case. There are others. If we can't get to Morrison directly, we'll send a message through someone else on his team. Find out who his closest colleague is. Someone with a family of their own." Maria felt sick. Vincent wasn't giving up on terrorizing innocent people. He was just expanding his targets. How many families would suffer before this was over? That evening, as Maria prepared to leave the mansion, she made a decision that terrified and energized her in equal measure. She was going to break into Vincent's safe. Not tonight. That would be too risky with people still around. But tomorrow night, when Vincent would be at his meeting in Chicago. Getting into the safe would require more than just opportunity. It would require knowledge. Maria spent her bus ride home thinking about everything she had observed over the past 3 years. Vincent was careful about his safe, but like all people, he had habits and patterns. She had seen him open it dozens of times while cleaning nearby, always when he thought no one was watching. The combination was long, at least 8 digits, but Maria had noticed that Vincent always paused at certain points when entering it. If she could figure out the pattern, she might be able to crack it. It was a long shot, but it was her only chance to get the evidence needed to stop the corruption and save innocent lives. Back in her apartment, Maria sat down with a notebook and began writing down everything she could remember about Vincent's safe-opening routine. The way he stood, the pauses in his movements, the number of times he turned the dial in each direction. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing, but she was determined to figure it out. As she worked, Maria thought about the prosecutor's family, now in hiding because of her warning. She thought about Senator Whitmore, betraying his oath of office for money. She thought about all the other families who might suffer if Vincent Rossetti's network of corruption continued to operate unchecked. For years, Maria had accepted her place as an invisible outsider, someone who cleaned up other people's messes without being seen or heard. But now she realized that her invisibility was actually a superpower. She could go places and hear things that no police officer or federal agent could access. She was the perfect spy, precisely because no one would ever suspect a poor maid of being capable of bringing down a criminal empire. The next day would be the most dangerous of Maria's life. She would either succeed in exposing one of the biggest corruption scandals in the city's history, or she would disappear forever. Just another immigrant who asked too many questions and learned too much. But as she fell asleep that night, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. For the first time since arriving in this country, she was going to fight back. She was going to use her invisibility as a weapon, and she was going to make sure that the powerful men who destroyed innocent lives would finally face justice. Tomorrow night, the maid they ignored would uncover secrets that could topple governments. And Vincent Rossetti, the man who had never bothered to learn her full name, would discover that the most dangerous person in his house had been hiding in plain sight all along. The safe held answers, and Maria was going to get them, no matter what the cost. Because sometimes the smallest person in the room was actually the one with the power to change everything. The night Vincent Rossetti left for Chicago was the longest of Maria's life. She had volunteered to work late, telling Mrs. Patterson that she wanted to do some deep cleaning in the study while the Don was away. The head housekeeper had been happy to approve the overtime, never suspecting that Maria had ulterior motives. By 9 o'clock, the mansion was nearly empty. Only 2 guards remained on the property, one at the front gate and another patrolling the grounds. Maria had studied their patterns for months and knew she would have approximately 20-minute windows when the roaming guard was on the far side of the estate. Standing before the painting of Vincent's father, Maria felt her hands shake as she carefully moved it aside to reveal the safe. The steel door seemed to mock her with its complexity, but Maria had spent the entire day rehearsing the combination sequence she had observed and memorized. She took a deep breath and began turning the dial. Right 4 times, pause, left twice, pause, right 6 times, pause. Her heart hammered as she reached for the handle, praying that her observations had been accurate. The safe didn't open. Maria closed her eyes and tried again, this time paying closer attention to the subtle pauses she had noticed in Vincent's routine. Right 4 times to 27, left twice to 63, right 6 times to 19, left once to 42. She held her breath and tried the handle again. Click. The safe opened, revealing stacks of documents, cash, and several small electronic devices that Maria didn't recognize. But what caught her attention immediately was a leather-bound ledger sitting on the top shelf, along with dozens of manila envelopes marked with dates and names. Maria quickly pulled out her phone and began photographing everything she could see. The ledger alone contained hundreds of entries, payments to judges, police officers, city council members, and federal officials. Senator Whitmore's name appeared regularly, but he wasn't the only one. The corruption network was massive, involving dozens of public servants who had been bought and paid for by the Rossetti organization. One envelope particularly drew her attention. It was marked Insurance, Morrison Investigation, and contained photographs, personal information, and detailed schedules for not just Prosecutor Morrison's family, but for 5 other prosecutors working on organized crime cases. Vincent had been planning to terrorize all of them, but the most shocking discovery was in a red envelope marked Emergency Protocol. Inside were detailed plans for what Vincent called the Chicago Solution, a coordinated effort with other crime families to eliminate federal oversight permanently. The plan involved assassinating key prosecutors and federal agents, making it look like accidents or random crimes. Prosecutor Morrison was just the beginning. Vincent was planning to murder dozens of law enforcement officials across multiple states. As Maria photographed the documents, she realized she was looking at evidence of the largest criminal conspiracy in modern American history. This wasn't just about local corruption or intimidating prosecutors. This was about dismantling the entire federal justice system. Her phone's storage was filling up rapidly, but Maria forced herself to be systematic. She photographed every page of the ledger, every document in every envelope, and even the serial numbers on the electronic devices, which she suspected might be used for encrypted communications. 20 minutes had passed. The patrol guard would be returning soon. Maria carefully returned everything to its original position and closed the safe. As she moved the painting back into place, she heard footsteps outside the study door. Maria quickly grabbed her cleaning supplies and began polishing the desk, her heart racing as the door opened. Tommy Carbone walked in, looking surprised to see her there. "What are you doing here so late?" he demanded. "Mr. Rossetti, he asked me to clean good while he away," Maria replied in her deliberately broken English, keeping her eyes downcast. "I finish soon." Tommy studied her suspiciously for a moment, then shrugged. "Make it quick. I don't want anyone wandering around here tonight." After he left, Maria finished her fake cleaning and gathered her supplies. She had done it. She had the evidence needed to bring down Vincent Rossetti and his entire network. But getting the information out safely would be just as dangerous as obtaining it. Maria left the mansion at 11 o'clock, taking the bus to a 24-hour internet cafe in the city center. Using a computer that couldn't be traced back to her, she created anonymous email accounts and began uploading the photographs to secure cloud storage services. She also sent copies to multiple news organizations, the FBI field office, and the U.S. Attorney's office. But Maria knew that email alone might not be enough. Vincent had people everywhere, and there was always the risk that the evidence could be suppressed or discredited. She needed insurance of her own. The next morning, Maria returned to work as if nothing had happened. Vincent was still in Chicago, and the mansion felt different somehow, less threatening now that she held the power to destroy the man who lived there. But she also knew that her danger was far from over. Once Vincent discovered that his safe had been compromised, he would stop at nothing to find out who had betrayed him. Around noon, Maria's worst fears were confirmed. Tommy Carbone came racing into the mansion with news that sent everyone into a panic. "Federal agents are raiding our businesses all over the city," he announced to the gathered staff. "Someone leaked information about our operations. The boss is flying back immediately." Maria continued dusting furniture, her face carefully neutral, but inside she was celebrating. The FBI had acted on her evidence faster than she had dared hope. By tonight, arrest warrants would be issued for dozens of corrupt officials, and the Rossetti criminal empire would be in ruins. But her celebration was premature. At 3 o'clock, Vincent Rossetti returned to the mansion in a rage unlike anything Maria had ever witnessed. She could hear him shouting from his study, demanding answers about how federal agents had obtained such detailed information about his operations. "Someone betrayed us," Vincent roared. "Someone with access to information that should have been impossible to obtain. I want every employee questioned, every business associate investigated. Whoever did this is going to pay with their life." Maria knew she had very little time. Vincent would eventually figure out that his safe had been compromised, and once he did, it wouldn't take long to identify her as the most likely suspect. She was the only person who had unsupervised access to his study, and despite her carefully cultivated invisibility, someone would eventually remember seeing her there. That evening, as Maria prepared to leave work for what she suspected might be the last time, she was stopped by two of Vincent's men. "Boss wants to see you," one of them said, his hand resting on the bulge under his jacket. Maria's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I finished cleaning. Something wrong?" "Just come with us." Maria was escorted to Vincent's study, where the man himself was sitting behind his massive desk. His face was calm, but his eyes held a fury that made Maria want to run. Standing behind him were Tommy Carbone and two other men she recognized as Vincent's most trusted enforcers. "Maria, isn't it?" Vincent said, his voice deceptively gentle. "In all these years, I don't think we've ever had a proper conversation." "No, sir," Maria replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "That's going to change tonight. You see, we have a problem. Someone stole very sensitive information from this room, and I believe you might be able to help us figure out who." Vincent stood up and walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of Maria. "The thing is, whoever betrayed us knew exactly where to look and exactly what to photograph. They had detailed knowledge of my personal security measures. That suggests someone who has been in this room many times, someone who had the opportunity to observe and plan." Maria kept her expression blank, but her mind was racing. How much did Vincent actually know, and how much was he guessing? "Now, I've been thinking," Vincent continued, "about all the people who have access to this study. My most trusted associates, a few family members, and of course the cleaning staff. Interesting thing about cleaning staff, they become invisible after a while. People forget they're there, say things they shouldn't say, leave things out they shouldn't leave out." The trap was closing, but Maria had one final card to play. Over the past 24 hours, while Vincent had been in Chicago, she had been busy with more than just photographing documents. She had also been making arrangements of her own. "I no understand, sir," Maria said, maintaining her confused immigrant persona. "You think I take something?" "I think you're a lot smarter than you've been pretending to be," Vincent replied. "In fact, I think you understand every word I'm saying perfectly. The question is, what did you do with the information you stole?" Before Maria could respond, Tommy Carbone's phone buzzed. He answered it, his face growing pale as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "Boss," he said, his voice tight with concern. "We've got a problem. The news stations are running a story about Senator Whitmore. They have documents, recordings, everything. His office just announced he's resigning immediately." Vincent's calm facade finally cracked. "What recordings?" "Apparently someone's been documenting our conversations with his staff for months. They have audio and video evidence of money changing hands, vote buying, the whole thing." Maria felt a surge of satisfaction. The small recording device she had planted in Vincent's study 3 months ago, disguised as part of the cleaning equipment she left behind each day, had captured every incriminating conversation. She had been planning her move for much longer than anyone realized. Vincent turned back to Maria, and for the first time, she saw something new in his eyes: fear. "You've been recording us," he said, no longer asking questions. "For how long?" Maria straightened her shoulders and, for the first time in 3 years, looked Vincent Rossetti directly in the eyes. "Long enough," she said in perfect, unaccented English. "Long enough to document every crime, every payoff, every threat you've made. Long enough to gather evidence that's already in the hands of federal prosecutors, news organizations, and international human rights groups." The transformation was remarkable. In an instant, Maria had shed the persona of the invisible immigrant maid and revealed herself as the intelligent, determined woman she had always been. Vincent stepped backward, clearly stunned by the change. "The evidence is already public," Maria continued. "By tomorrow morning, arrest warrants will be issued for you, your associates, and every corrupt official you've been paying. The Justice Department has enough evidence to dismantle your entire organization and put all of you away for life." "You little—" Vincent started toward her, but Maria held up her hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. You see, I haven't just been collecting evidence. I've also been making arrangements for my own protection. If anything happens to me, additional evidence will be released automatically. Evidence about the Chicago solution, about your plans to assassinate federal agents and prosecutors." Vincent froze. "How could you possibly know about that?" Maria smiled. Because I know everything, Mr. Rossetti. I know about every safe house, every hiding place, every escape plan you've made. For 3 years, I've been the invisible woman in your house, and you told me everything without even realizing it. Sirens were becoming audible in the distance, growing louder by the second. Maria had timed everything perfectly. Her confession to Vincent was meant to delay him just long enough for the authorities to arrive. "The FBI is coming," Maria said calmly, "along with federal marshals, the state police, and about 50 other agents who are very excited to meet you. You have 2 choices: surrender peacefully or try to run and make this much worse for yourself." The sirens were very close now, and Maria could see flashing lights through the study windows. Vincent looked around the room like a trapped animal, his empire crumbling around him in real time. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm exactly who I said I was," Maria replied. "I'm Maria Santos, a maid from El Salvador who sends money home to her sick mother. The only difference is that I'm also someone who believes that powerful men shouldn't be allowed to destroy innocent lives just because they can." The front door burst open, and the sound of shouting filled the mansion. Federal agents were swarming through the house, but Maria wasn't worried. She had anticipated this moment for months and had already made arrangements with the authorities for her own safety and legal protection. As Vincent Rossetti was handcuffed and read his rights, he looked at Maria one final time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Maria replied. "It's been over since the moment you decided to threaten Prosecutor Morrison's family. You just didn't know it yet." 6 months later, Maria Santos sat in a federal courtroom, testifying in the largest organized crime trial in American history. Vincent Rossetti and 43 associates had been charged with racketeering, murder, conspiracy, and corruption of federal officials. Senator Whitmore and a dozen other politicians were facing their own trials. Prosecutor Morrison, whose family was now safe and no longer in hiding, personally thanked Maria for her courage. The evidence she had gathered had led to the dismantling of criminal networks in 6 states and the resignation of numerous corrupt officials. Maria had been offered placement in the Witness Protection Program, but she had declined. Instead, she had used her testimony and the resulting book deal to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting immigrant workers and exposing labor exploitation. Her story had inspired others to speak out against injustice, and she had become an unlikely hero in communities across the country. The maid they had ignored had done more than uncover dangerous secrets. She had proven that courage and intelligence could triumph over wealth and power. In a world where the powerful routinely escaped consequences for their actions, Maria Santos had reminded everyone that justice was still possible, one invisible woman at a time. Vincent Rossetti received life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man who had once controlled judges and senators was now just another number in the federal prison system, his empire reduced to nothing more than evidence in storage boxes. And Maria Santos, the woman who had brought him down, continued her work of protecting the powerless and holding the powerful accountable, because she had learned something that Vincent Rossetti never understood. True power didn't come from wealth or violence or corruption. True power came from having the courage to do what was right, even when everything was stacked against you. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room was the one everyone thought was invisible.